Sonic the Hedgehog 2006 is a notorious game that needs no introduction. It's a game known for its rushed development and technical issues that were a result of said rushed development. It can best be described as the Phantom Menace of the Sonic franchise. In that, while the game was reviled when it came out and disappointed many fans, there's recently been a wave of fans that insist it's not as bad as people made it out to be. Mostly coming from those who were really young when it came out and have nostalgia for it. Many of these people seem to believe that the backlash towards 06 was unjustified, as if the masses were needlessly and especially harsh on this game for no reason, writing off the backlash as mindless hate instead of constructive criticism. And while there's nothing wrong with reanalyzing a piece of media in a more nuanced way and potentially finding the good in said media, it's when people start grasping for straws and misrepresenting why the game was so hated in the first place that I start to take issue with it. Don't think of this video as me attacking people for merely liking Sonic 06. I'm more so just defending the criticism against Sonic 06, as I think it was more than fair and far more constructive despite what the revisionists would have you believe. One common tactic by the revisionist crowd is that they will take something successful and beloved and compare it to an infamous aspect of Sonic 06 to try to call out some kind of grand hypocrisy. But they do this by ignoring key differences and stripping everything away in order to make their comparisons work. One of the most infamous aspects of Sonic 06's story is the romance between Sonic and Princess Elise. The hedgehog-human relationship rubbed many people the wrong way in 2006, and for good reason. But now we're seeing the 06 revisionists defending this romance by comparing it to the likes of Roger and Jessica Rabbit and Beauty and the Beast, while again ignoring key details that might throw a wrench in their arguments.
Plenty of the people who criticise this scene were probably fans of things such as Roger and Jessica Rabbit or Beauty and the Beast. In both those and more, we see humans in a romantic relation with a fictional anthropomorphic character. So why is it such a huge sin when it happens with Sonic? I'm being serious here, why was there such an outcry over this? With claims that Sega was promoting bestiality even thrown out there. It comes off as massively hypocritical in accusations when it seems anyone else was allowed to do that just fine. Sonic was even going to have a more blatant human relationship back in the classic era. Although that idea was scrapped, it re-emerged during the Sonic OVA movie.
In the case of Roger Rabbit, it's clearly played for laughs. The inherent absurdity of an attractive woman being married to a goofy cartoon rabbit was never lost on the writers.
Seriously, what do you see in that guy?
He makes me laugh.
With Sonic and Elise, it's played completely straight. There's a lack of self-awareness anytime they're on screen together having all these mushy moments, and it's really hard for most people to take it seriously. Even in the case of Sarah from the OVA, they were clearly playing up the cartoon comedy angle. The writers weren't expecting you to take it seriously as a sincere attempt at romance. Madonna was scrapped from Sonic 1 because when Sega of Japan pitched the concept to Sega of America, they felt it would alienate Western audiences, and clearly they were right, even 15 years later. Hell, even then, from the little concept art we do see of Madonna, I'd still argue that the comedy was going to be played up on some level. I mean, just look how goofy she is. I'm not even the first person to bring this up, as I think Geek Critique already put it into words perfectly 6 years ago in his 06 review.
The fact is, with any other example that I could find, the inherent absurdity of a cartoon-human relationship is part of the premise, and it's always played up, at least on some level, how silly a concept this is. But Sonic 06 plays it straight as an arrow. The game is absolutely, positively, unyieldingly sincere in its portrayal. It's as if audiences were expected to find absolutely nothing even a little off about it, and that total lack of self-awareness makes it so much more unsettling.
But that leaves us with Beauty and the Beast, which is far more sincere in its portrayal, so case closed, right? Well, not necessarily, because there's still plenty of factors to consider. For starters, the Beast is a natural-born human who was cursed by a sorceress. Granted, I don't think Belle was aware of this and seems visibly off-put by his human form, but then again, who isn't? But ultimately, the fact that he's human and they don't even share a kiss until after he transforms does make it an easier pill to swallow. There's also the matter of art direction. Sonic and Elise simply look uncanny together. Elise is an anatomically correct human, and Sonic is a rubber hose cartoon character with a huge head and unit high. Again, if the absurdity was played up on some level, this probably would have worked, but because it's played straight, there's sort of a disconnection, and the fact that they used motion capture for these cutscenes really doesn't help.
The character models are so dead. They don't have a good range of emotions, so Sonic and friends look like basketball mascots or mannequins or something. No, seriously, this is a big deal. Why is it the spin-off game that focuses on airborne racing can have really fun cutscenes, but the 15th anniversary game that prides itself on the ultra-realism they gave to Dr. Eggman has no good animation at all? Seriously, when you watch the scenes, the characters are so blank. Sonic just stares ahead, never changing his facial structure.
These character designs just do not belong side by side, and forcing these characters to inhabit the same space kinda creates a no-win situation in terms of animation style. Because relatively realistic humans like these, they're gonna look pretty uncanny if you animate them in a cartoony way, but cartoon characters this stylized are gonna look weird if you animate them naturalistically. Speaking of which, can you please stop using motion capture to animate Sonic characters? It looks bizarre. Especially if you're not going to heavily modify that motion data or actually animate the characters' faces. Sonic 06 is peak mascot suit problem.
Beast, on top of looking like he could belong in the same world as Belle, also looks far more humanoid than Sonic in my opinion. So it's not really that much of a stretch, especially if you're into big hairy dudes. And yes, big hairy dudes is now in my Google search history, so I hope you people appreciate what I do for you. Lastly, Beauty and the Beast has this whole theme of not to be deceived by appearance, and true beauty is found within, and all that jazz. One of the ways the story communicates this is with the villain Gaston, the handsome town hero who everyone adores, being a possessive bastard who tries to blackmail Belle into marriage. Meanwhile, the Beast, despite being, a beast, ultimately has the heart to let Belle go, putting her needs before his own. It works, it serves the theme.
I didn't know better. I'd think you had feelings for this monster.
He's no monster, Gaston. You are.
In Sonic 06, the human-hedgehog contrast doesn't really seem to serve any sort of purpose. Through the entire story, no one ever challenges the idea of a human being with a hedgehog. They could have both been hedgehogs, and the story would work about as well, if not more so. The point I'm trying to make here is that no one is a hypocrite for hating this, but not having an issue with these. The reality is that you can make any bonkers premise work under the right context and tone. Want to write a story where Sonic has a human love interest? Well, fine, but if you're not gonna play up the absurdity like Roger Rabbit or commit to a theme like Beauty and the Beast, and you're just gonna play it completely straight without even acknowledging the elephant in the room, it's just gonna be distracting. I'm not even arguing that you're wrong for liking this pairing. I'm arguing that pretending that it's the same as either of these, and that you're a hypocrite for having a problem with one but not the others, is just plain dishonest. These comparisons only work if you strip everything away. Now, this whole comparing successful things to 06 in an attempt to prove some kind of double standard doesn't just apply to the story. Strawman arguments like these also extend to aspects of the gameplay. Another one of the major criticisms is the way the game handles multiple playable characters, and how most of them just aren't that fun to play as. But some of the 06 revisionists see this as some kind of irrational hatred of multiple playable characters in Sonic specifically, while other games get away with it. Such as this user named Spigdreddy in his video titled, "They Lied About Sonic 06," in all caps.
So the easiest way to do this is to break down a review of the game and point out the silly takes, and trust me, there are some silly takes out there. But let's use everybody's favorite media company, IGN. IGN gave this a 4.8 and broke down why. First of all, they mentioned that it is usually a good thing that there are multiple playable characters, but in this case, none of the characters' powers are unique and stand out, and they point to Sonic, Tails, Silver, and Shadow. Of course, they failed to mention the other playable characters like Rouge, Knuckles, Blaze, and Amy, but I digress. Now, of course, these are supporting characters. Keep that in mind. The main trio of the game is Silver, Shadow, and Sonic. That is the story that you experience. It's through their eyes. But the point that I'm trying to make is that this is still a very diverse roster. To say that the powers don't stand out is insane. Omega can literally turn into an FPS machine gun along with shooting bombs and clawing enemies. Shadow retains his powers from his game Shadow the Hedgehog, where he uses chaos abilities to make explosions and zap people with lightning. And Sonic retains all of the adventure speed abilities like the light dash, the bounce bracelet, and of course he can go supersonic. So to put it bluntly, this first take that powers aren't standing out in this game is kinda stupid. I mean, are some better than others? Sure, but they at least give you many different options to experience within the greater context of the story. That's cool.
Now, I want you to remember this part when we come back to it later, because it represents a much bigger problem with the 06 revisionists, but for now, we'll just say that those who know already know damn well what's wrong with everything he just said.
Also, no one complains about Mario's playable roster usually being the same gameplay-wise most of the time. I mean, what's the difference in Super Mario Wonder between Luigi, Mario, and any other character? Luigi, like, jumps higher, and then Nabbit just doesn't take damage. This is literally flirting versus sexual harassment, and it happens all the time for Sonic. When Sonic introduces a bunch of characters with unique powers, ooh, I don't know if they're actually interesting enough. When Mario gives you a playable roster of basically the same character with different color skins, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Let's give it a 9 out of 10.
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack here, but just like the Elise argument, most of this boils down to comparing 06 to something successful that's only similar if you squint your eyes enough in order to make the critics look like hypocrites. He uses Super Mario Wonder's structure to argue that there's some kind of double standard here, but the way this game handles its playable roster is completely different. You have the freedom to choose any character you want from the get-go, while Sonic 06 occasionally forces you to play as certain characters in order to get through a specific section in a level. You could be playing as Silver in Dusty Desert, and then boom, now you have to play as Amy, who isn't as capable in combat. Silver has telekinesis powers where he can pick up objects as well as enemies and hurl them at other enemies, as well as the ability to hover over most gaps with ease. While Amy has this delayed hammer attack that doesn't have the best range, as well as a double jump that halts all momentum on the second jump, which just kind of defeats the purpose of having one. She can also turn invisible for some reason, which isn't very useful. When you're forced to play as a character that isn't as powerful or fun to play as, of course it's going to be seen as a pace breaker. IGN likes the way Mario Wonder handles its roster, probably because they all handle similarly, as well as having the freedom to choose. There's nothing hypocritical about that. And get this, there have been times in the past where the Sonic series has used this same framework when handling multiple characters, usually in the 2D outings such as Sonic 3 and Knuckles, Sonic Advance, and Sonic Mania. These games give you the freedom to choose between multiple characters, all of which play similarly with a few unique attributes and abilities. And oh, look at that! These games get unreal praise on par with Mario. There's no hypocrisy, there's no double standard. This isn't a Mario versus Sonic thing. It's called people like consistency in their video games. And there's nothing wrong with that. Now, those of you familiar with Sonic 06 are probably watching Spaghetti's gameplay footage and thinking, wait a minute, this doesn't look like Sonic 06. Tails wasn't this fast in the original game. What the hell? What is this? Well, that's because Spaghetti isn't using footage of the original game. He's using footage of Sonic Project 06, which is a fan-made recreation of Sonic 06 made entirely in Unity by Chaos X. Its first demo was released in 2019 and still gets updates to this day. It aims to address various issues by fixing the bugs, enhancing the physics, tightening the controls, and increasing the character's speed. Pretty much all characters like the aforementioned Amy were completely overhauled. She's much faster, her hammer attacks have better range, and her double jump actually retains momentum. Truly groundbreaking stuff. I could go on, but if I listed everything Project 06 fixes from the original, we would literally be here all day. So I recommend watching BikuriBox's videos on Project 06 for a more in-depth analysis on how P06 enhances the original. So yeah, it's a really cool fan project that shows how Sonic 06 could have been if it wasn't rushed. It takes the concepts and blueprints of 06 and turns it into what might have been the best 3D Sonic game at that point. But that's the key phrase here, what might have been. Because you see, what's really annoying is how the 06 revisionists like to use this fan project as validation for the original game. They think that because there's a fixed version of 06 that exists now, that means the game was always good deep down. Which brings me back to this earlier part in Spaghetti's video.
But the point that I'm trying to make is that this is still a very diverse roster. To say that the powers don't stand out is insane. Omega can literally turn into an FPS machine gun along with shooting bombs and clawing enemies. Shadow retains his powers from his game Shadow the Hedgehog, where he uses chaos abilities to make explosions and zap people with lightning. And Sonic retains all of the adventure speed abilities like the light dash, the bounce bracelet, and of course he can go supersonic. So to put it bluntly, this first take that powers aren't standing out in this game is kind of stupid.
See, what he fails to mention here is that this IGN review was written in 2006, and nearly every example he uses against it are improvements or additions made in Project 06, the 2019 fan remake. Do you see the problem here? Omega did not have that FPS mode or any claw attacks. And you couldn't turn supersonic in regular stages. Those are Project 06 editions. Shadow did have Chaos Blast in the original game, but it was less like this and more like this. Yeah, that was it. In short, he's using a 2019 fan remake as ammo against a review from 2006. And he's well aware of this because eventually he acknowledges Project 06, and this is how he justifies it.
Project 06 is a fan-made remake of Sonic 06, and it's one of the coolest fan-made games ever. This takes all the flaws of Sonic 06 and fixes them with updated graphics too. From Sonic, Shadow, and Silver's story, all of these levels get meaningful tweaks to help make the game's experience even better than it was before, and of course, it is needed. Like I said, I am totally fine admitting this game has flaws. I believe it does. But the formula is still the same. Sonic 06 is no different in Project 06. Yes, it runs on a better engine, yes, it looks better, yes, the physics are a little bit tweaked, but this is still Sonic the Hedgehog that came out in 2006.
So you acknowledge that the original game had flaws, Project 06 made meaningful tweaks that address those flaws and it's better for it, but you also think it's more or less the same experience?
And I think what Project 06 proves is that Sonic 06 is fundamentally a really good concept. The idea and execution, of course, was poor, but not enough to make this the worst game of its generation. Especially if one person can remake the game with improvements to the graphics, an engine switch, character speed, and all of a sudden people love it. That tells you the game was never really that far off from being good in the first place.
Oh, wow! So what you're saying is, if you take a shitty game and fix all the problems people had with it, that they'll praise it? I think you cracked the code here. Like, yeah, of course people are gonna praise the fixed version that addresses all of their critiques. I'm so tired of people using Project 06 as a gotcha moment. Project 06 doesn't prove anyone wrong. If anything, I'd say it vindicates that criticism. Yes, Project 06 fixed these characters and made their abilities stand out, but it's not the game we received in 2006. Several characters' movesets were completely overhauled. You cannot show me footage of the original game along with Project 06 side by side and tell me with a straight face that they are more or less the same experience. You can't. I mean, just look at this. It's practically a different game entirely. I feel that reducing P06 to just being the same game but runs better is really selling short the work Chaos X put into it. Yes, it's built on the same foundation of the original, but the game feel is so drastically different, and so many of the characters' movesets are so drastically different, that it fundamentally changes the way the game is played. He didn't just tweak the game's physics, he gave the game physics. The original game had no sense of flow or momentum. You move at the same speed regardless of the terrain, and in some cases, they coded certain surfaces so that you could just stick to them like Spider-Man, and they hoped no one would notice. Well, we did. The only way to pick up any sort of speed is by running over dash panels. Compare this to the adventure titles, where the terrain did have an effect on your speed, and you could use the terrain to your advantage to find shortcuts, which was immensely satisfying. In 06, you can't even so much as jump out of a spin dash, which is just criminal. That's a basic feature in every other Sonic game. 06 isn't just flawed, it's a downgrade from what came before. Why is Sonic Adventure, a game from 1998, more advanced than a game from 2006? How is that excusable? How is this game considered a misunderstood masterpiece when it fumbles mechanics that were done better 8 years prior? Is it so unreasonable to expect a sequel to improve upon, or at least not be any worse than its predecessor? People are always on about the ambition and the potential of 06, but has anyone stopped to think that one of the main reasons 06 caught so much flack was precisely because it had so much potential and failed to live up to it? I don't get this backwards logic that something merely having potential to be a masterpiece automatically makes it a masterpiece. The potential of Sonic 06 was never lost on people. Even Clement, for as much as he hates this game, and even though his review is one of the longest and most scathing, even he laments how much potential this game had, and makes it a point in his review that he is a big Sonic fan and didn't go into this game wanting to hate it.
What makes Sonic 06 so disappointing to so many people is the idea that this game had the potential to be the best 3D Sonic game in the series, or at least the most decent one since the Sonic Adventure games. Aside from the realistic look of the game, it didn't have a gimmick. It wasn't centered around three-person gameplay, or guns, or airboards, or any of that crap. It was a new Sonic game that seemed to have that legitimate X factor again. I've been a Sonic fan since I was a 7-year-old playing Sonic the Hedgehog 2 on my Sega Genesis. Hell, Sonic the Hedgehog 2 is my favorite video game of all time. I know, my favorite and least favorite games are both Sonic. It may affect how much 06 made me angry, but I do have valid criticisms to cover. I like this series. I'm coming into this review telling you this because I want you to understand where I'm coming from. I didn't want to hate this game. I have no ill will towards the people responsible for this game. The people at Sonic Team have made some great content. And I couldn't imagine the pressure one would have trying to make Sonic 06 as big and as ambitious as it tried to be. But still, I had to play this game. It was soul-crushing.
And I also want to point out that this game's perceived failure led to the real dark age of Sonic. No, not the one you were lied to about where they talk about the rough transition into 3D, but the actual dark age for Sonic, which is 2010 Sonic, where we got Sonic games that felt like mobile games on console. And it all started with the game that I hate the most in the entire franchise, Sonic Unleashed, a game where you become a stupid werehog. And then it was followed up by a game where you have to battle Eggman at his evil carnival palace, and it's basically a 2D game that is disguised as a 3D game. And then you got this garbage, and so much more.
So, I've seen many people echo this sentiment that not only is 06 a misunderstood masterpiece, but also that the 2010s was the true dark age for the franchise. And while you're entitled to your own opinion on which games are better or worse, this brings me back to the whole "it had potential" argument. My problem is that you could say this about literally any game, and not just within the confines of Sonic.
Time to waste.
Man, this game sucks. Well, it had potential to be good. Oh, yeah, I didn't think about that. Like, you see how that doesn't work? And why does this only apply to 06? You hate Unleashed in Colors, but did these games not also have potential? Are they just lost causes? If so, then why? You say we're closed-minded for not seeing the potential of 06, but you think it's perfectly reasonable to write off Colors solely because of its story and the lack of 3D sections. You reduce its story to just being about Eggman's evil carnival, and yeah, the story isn't exactly complex, but it's an amusement park in space spanning multiple planets. I don't care how jaded you are, that's an inherently cool idea for a setting in a game. How much Sega actually took advantage of that setting is another story, but hey, it had potential. Yeah? You see what I did there? When your go-to argument for 06 is it had potential, you're not really defending the product Sega released in 2006. You're defending an idea of the game that didn't exist until Chaos X came along. So many people see the hatred for 06 as some kind of arbitrary bandwagon that the masses just kind of went along with, and most of the common critiques are easy to debunk, and I think I've demonstrated it's a little more complicated than that. That was my goal here. It wasn't just to rag on people for merely liking this game. If you like Sonic 06, that's perfectly fine. We all have our guilty pleasures here. I'm just tired of the narrative that 06 is this misunderstood masterpiece that no one ever gave a fair chance. I'm tired of all this misinformation being spread about why this game was so hated in the first place. This game is nearly 20 years old now. Let that sink in. So there's likely a whole generation of people who only know Project 06 and are probably confused as to why this game was considered such a train wreck when it came out. And I felt it was important to remind people. Even though I've poked fun at their arguments, I strongly discourage harassing anyone I've mentioned in this video. We're all just nerds talking about a blue rat on the internet after all.